This episode is brought to you by
Cry Havoc, from New York Times #1 bestselling author Jack Carr. Cry Havoc, a Tom Reese thriller. Order now.
It occurred to him that this might have been one of the most terrifying ways to die. Murdered by a thing with a face, but no eyes. With hands, but no skin. With a body, but no soul.
Alex, thank you so much. Sincerely appreciate you taking the time today. And this is out when we're recording this. This is just been out for a couple days now. So you're in the week.
That's right.
Are you on the book tour right now?
Yes, I'm in Coral Gables at the moment, going to Books and Books in a few hours, which is nice. Nice little break from being a parent and being East for one day at least. Yeah.
That's wild that book tour can be a break from.
I know, right?
They get crazy, but
yeah.
I guess before we jump into the Tin Men and everything, this book, it was amazing, by the way. Loved it. Read it on my flight when I texted you about that. Read it on my flight to Syracuse and back, and such great work. Amazing job. But I wanted to show you this first. I went in the other room and grabbed it. So the book's behind me. This was supposed to be all the nonfiction stuff in this side, and then I have stuff and Fleming over here and books about Fleming and Bond on there. But the other room over there is all the fiction. And so, of course, I have all your dad's first editions signed now. Didn't have those growing up. I had the paperbacks growing up, of course. It was such a huge influence on me, personally and professionally, I think. I mean, he was such a titan in the industry. And he came on the podcast, which was very kind of him. And this one right here, though, is my original Triumph School, and has my grandmother, who is no longer with us, her writing in there.
Amazing.
It's so
That's
special.
a well-loved book right there.
It is, and it's survived all the moves from the military, from when I was a little kid, back and forth to our cabin, college, military, and now multiple moves post-military. So still with me, and one of my most prized possessions right here.
I love that. That's the first of his books I read.
Is it really?
Triumph School. Yeah.
Makes sense, I guess.
Special place for me too. Yeah, it's great.
Incredible. And then I got to meet you at your dad's memorial.
Thank you for being there.
Of course. Yeah. It was the least I could do with how much of an influence he was on me, and just an amazing person, and those books just helped shape me professionally and personally, like I said. So the least I could do. But thoughts and prayers still with you guys.
Thank you.
The end of so many people still obviously are going to miss him forever, and feel so connected to him because of his work. And then you have continued that here and got to finish this last book that you started together. Before I get to that, though, your path into the lead up to writing with your dad for these last couple novels here. Screenwriter. And so what was your path into screenwriting, and then into that phone call with I think it was a phone call with your dad when he proposed working together?
Yeah. So I was 25. I moved to LA to go to grad school for the film production program. And so I was there for a few years. I wanted to be a director and a writer-director. Made some shorts. The final short that I made for my thesis project, it won some festivals. It got me a write-up in Hollywood Reporter. That got me an agent and a manager, and I started doing the rounds. And then I just started developing features and feature scripts that I was going to make, doing pitches. I was doing all that stuff, and it was sort of going somewhere, but not as fast as I would like. I think anybody can probably identify with that. And I started editing as well. And I think actually shortly before he called me, I had edited a short film that ended up being nominated for an Oscar. And then I started getting a lot of phone calls about editing projects. And it could have been a turning point for a career as a film editor, which was what I was considering doing in that moment. And And then he called me. I mean, I was still writing, but it was, trying to do multiple things at once. He called me and he said, "Hey, you want to?" And I knew he was working on this co-written book actually with somebody else, and it hadn't worked out. Like the whole thing just it just wasn't working, and they decided to stop, but they didn't want to pull the plug on the project. So he said, "Hey, do you want to start from scratch and write this book with me?" And I was a little, for a lot of reasons, wasn't sure. I knew this would be kind of a life-changing decision right here. I'd have to put everything else aside I was doing. I'd have to, am I going to be able to live up to this? Is he going to regret it, but then not be able to it's harder to fire your son than maybe some other guy you're working. There's a minefield, and this was 2017, late 2016, somewhere around there. And so I was like, look, let me take this. He had a premise. Let me take the premise. Let me write a proposal. You look at that, and let's decide together if we like what we have. And if we do, then we'll go to the publisher and then say, So that's what we did. We liked it. They liked it. And we got started. And then that's pretty much what I've been doing since.
Wow. And then
Yeah,
for this to be, and that you're right. I mean, I can imagine what it would be like to only imagine what it'd be like to work with your father on a book, because you're right. It's so, if you work with somebody else and it doesn't work out, okay, fine. It can get messy, maybe, whatever, but it's not as close to you as a family member. And then you guys dive into these together. And this is the third that you guys worked on, is that right?
that's right.
And so what was it like? I mean, I don't know if this is personal or not, knowing that this is the last one that you guys could have worked on together.
Yeah, I mean, it actually. So we worked on a proposal for this one together. Let's say in sometime in 2023, and gave it to the publisher, and it was accepted. And then I was going to kind of work on it in the background while he was focused on his solo book, which that was going to be his project for 2024. And then he has a hospitalized at the end of 2023, and we put his book to the side, and I kind of stepped into high gear. I mean, he was never a fast writer. He was not known as a fast writer, and I think I inherited the let's say not the habit, but like the value of you take as long as you need. And of course, we know in the business that's not always realistic, but now I was kind of writing on like a real schedule, which was, okay, I'm going from having nothing to turning this book in, and all the while that my father is sick and in chemo. So I chapter one, he was already sick. But we had laid this foundation, and he was, fortunately, I mean, he was a resilient guy. I mean, physically, mentally, and I didn't want him to be doing this, but he was reading and he was giving notes, and he was, for a while, for as long as possible, as sharp as he ever had been. And he kind of knew when he wasn't. I mean, he knew once just the physical toll was wearing him down to the point where he's like, I can't do my best work. And because he couldn't do his best work, he just stopped. So I kept sending him chapters almost out of like some blind optimism. He's going to get better, and then he's going to be able to look at this. But somewhere I knew that wasn't true, and I think he also knew that wasn't true. So that was hard. It was hard to kind of keep going, because part of me also almost wanted to slow walk it, because I wanted to wait until he could be involved. And so it was this kind of war going on in my head with this deadline approaching at the same time. So when he passed away in September, I can't remember how, there was a considerable portion of the book still to be written. And I was grieving and doing everything with emotionally and logistically, and had to finish the book by the end of the year. And I actually think that immense amount of pressure made it possible, because I wasn't sheltered from the grief, because I was doing this project that we'd done together and this work we'd done together, but it allowed a different kind of way in. And because I knew whatever I was working on, let's say the Desert or the first book, you're a veteran. He was a veteran. I am not. So a part of me thought, what right do I have to write about the military? But I'm writing it with him. I know that whatever I do, I'm going to use my own ideas about story and intuition and my understanding and fascination with people, put this in this context. And if there's something in there that feels wrong culturally, because the facts, you can get the facts. So I can research guns even if I haven't used guns that much, and I'm not going to get it all right, but I'll get some of it right. But some of that the deeper stuff I'm sure you understand, like about the military. I always thought, well, I have this like kind of I have this guy who's done it, who is kind of my safety net a little bit. So and ironically, the Tin Men, I would argue, is more about the military than the other two books. And so it was almost kind of bitter irony. That's the one I didn't have as much access to him about. But it was only because I'd written those two books that I felt I had the ability to do it. And I have a couple friends who are vets who read it, so I had a little bit of help in that regard as well. But yeah, I kind of felt like, okay, he's not there as an editor. No, I'm not, also not emailing them into the ether, thinking maybe someday he'll read them. It was just he was gone. So as we do, with people that are gone that we love that we know very well, I kind of conjured him as I was writing. I wrote it, I read it as me, then I read it as him, or his, not him, as my idea of him, and it added this extra level of this extra process before it went off to the editor, and it was strange. It was kind of beautiful.
Yeah. Wow. And for those that don't know, your dad was a Vietnam veteran, infantry, and he came on the podcast. He was so kind to do that, and we got to talk a little bit about military experience on that. But from outside looking in, like he seems like the tough guy, like the quintessential old school writer, Vietnam veteran, maybe cigarettes, cigars, scotch, and a writer's writer. And had enough clout where I'm curious where he didn't have to maybe if a deadline whizzed by, I mean, who's going to tell Nelson DeMille that, hey, you need to hurry up, type of a thing, or who's he going to is he even going to listen, type of a deal. What was that like? Like growing up, were you aware of his standing in the world of literature and publishing? Because for my kids, they could not be less impressed by any of the books, the television shows. I'm cool for a little bit when like going to Morocco and have my son hang out with Chris Pratt in a tent,
Right.
going to the premiere, bringing the kids. I'm cool for a minute and a half or so, and then I go back to being just goofy dad type of a thing. But
Right.
like your memories of him growing up, were you aware of just who he was in the world of literature, and was he that tough guy like I imagine with those with the cigarettes, cigars, and scotch?
Yeah. Well, he definitely he was yes and no. I mean, he was this kind of sweetest, most generous person, and I think part of what was so people miss so much about him and why he was so beloved, aside from his talent, was that he was one of those guys who kind of made you talk to him and he made you feel like you're the center of attention, and not in the way of like a politician who's kind of working in the room. I mean, there was a genuine love and fascination of people, which also obviously helps to be a good writer. And but yes, he drank. He was he drank his, and it wasn't fancy scotch. He was a Dewar's and club soda guy. And in his writing office, it was pencil shavings, and he drank like 2 pots of coffee a day, and like, there's a pile of cigarette butts in the ashtrays. That was it until the end. And I mean, until the end, that was how he did it. Growing up, you don't have a context, right? So it was like you're talking about taking your son to the premiere, and he gets to meet the guy who was in the Marvel movies, But for me, the equivalent, I guess, would be, this was back in the '90s when this was maybe more common. They would do these big, lavish book release parties, and there would be these huge cocktail parties. I remember going for the Gold Coast. I went to this. It was like a mansion on the North Shore, and it was this giant. And I brought a friend of mine. And I'm like, this was this whole other world. And there was this big, like, grand staircase, and the stairs were just lined with the copies of the Gold Coast going all the way up. And I was like, oh, this is kind of a big deal. Look at all these adults who dressed up and came out for this thing. And so those were the moments where I kind of understood better the context of how how successful he was. And yeah, he didn't. The only real big screen adaptation was The General's Daughter in '99, and so that was also that was kind of the first time that other people that I knew kind of he came more on their radar. Like, the Travolta movie, that was he wrote that. But yeah, mostly he was just down to earth, and I think that he was very approachable.
Yeah. And
for
he wrote
everybody.
number two. Was it number two pencil or number one? Something.
Number one, which I feel
Number
like most people
one.
don't even know about, is because it's a lot. It's softer, so
Yeah.
it glides more. That was his thing. So he kind of ran down. They run down faster, but yeah,
Yeah. I remember
because
asking about
he'd
that.
write this really quickly and this really fast scrawl.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
For over 22 years, Bravo Company has been trusted by professionals who go into harm's way. Because failure is not an option. Built to the highest standards, BCM rifles are made for those who demand reliability, precision, and grit. No gimmicks, no shortcuts, just tools forged for the fight. BCM, trusted by warriors, tested by time. Go to BravoCompanyUSA.com to learn more.
And for those listening also, so this is my first year where I had to postpone the previous book because I missed a deadline. But for me, it has to be about the work. It has to be about the book. It has to be the best they can possibly be. And that's what I owe those people who are spending time with me in the pages or listening to it now, time they're never going to get back. So I have to fend off the publishers and the agents who are putting so much pressure.
Yeah.
It was 1968, the one that just came out. 1968. And it took a lot longer than I thought it was going to write every sentence through the lens of 1968 and really be a time machine back there. It just took so much time. So I whizzed by a few deadlines there and had to push it from June to October. And maybe that wouldn't have mattered for the first couple books, but now I guess they're selling so much that or so well that it impacts now the business of Simon and Schuster.
Yeah, yeah.
And your dad obviously was like that as well.
Right.
You were talking about deadlines and work.
Oh
And
yeah,
all that.
oh yeah. Well, the more money you get, the more attention you get, which is from. It's not. It's like obviously you're fortunate, but it's also, not only a blessing. Oh yeah, because he was, again, because he was old school when he came up. He would say things like, in the old day, he became like an in the old days guy, which is not to say like he wasn't bitter. It was just that most of his career was in this other kind of format. It was like they wouldn't bother you, and when you had a book, you just send it to them. He's like, why can't it still be like that? And he would always talk about what's his name? God, the guy who writes, Sounds of the Lamb is Red Dragon, Harris.
Richard Harris, yeah.
Richard Harris, yeah.
Richard Harris. No, sorry, Richard Harris.
No, that's the actor.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So I can't remember. I know I can't remember his first name at the moment. But he's like, he'd write a book, every like 6 years, and his agents would be like, please don't do that. Please don't be like that. So he was more of he had his own regular schedule, which was a book every 2 years. And he says, what difference does it make? That's my pace. And, if you're not happy with a book, tell me. Otherwise, like, just go away. And that's what we're going to do. But the model, and I don't totally, I'm sure you understand it better than I do. The model of why and how this works. And I'd love to find out from you how you manage to write at the level you do because you've had a book a year since 2018, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So you're always, do you take breaks? You're always writing.
Always writing or working.
Yeah.
Because now it's a different landscape than it was. I hearken back to I'm back in the old days as well, but from a fan perspective, because I'm reading the Charm School in the 80s. I'm reading all the Clancy, the Morells, the AJ Quinnells, J.C. Pollocks, Mark Oldens, all these guys back then, Stephen Hunter, when they're contemporary thrillers. And part of the allure is that you can write a book at your pace, turn it into New York, go back to write the next one, and whenever you're done, you send it in, and no one's bugging you.
Right.
No email, no text, fax machines probably were like that. Maybe you had one, maybe you didn't. Maybe you answer the phone, maybe you don't. Maybe you have an answer machine, maybe you don't. And it's just so different today. So now everyone can bug you constantly about things and let you know that they're waiting on something, or that here's the repercussions of this or that, or how it's affecting the rest of the company, blah, blah, blah. You'd have no way to tell somebody that back in 1985, 86, 87. You wouldn't have. That's someone else's problem back then. If your agent, your agent answers the phone, they have to deal with it. So yeah, very, very different, obviously today. But for me, it's everything that had to do with me as far as sleep, health went to the not even the bottom of the list, but just off the list. I'm trying to figure out a better balance going forward where I can get a little sleep, get some exercise, and still write. But also, I looked at this as an entrepreneurial type of a venture, like the battlefield, meaning you got to capitalize on momentum, go for gaps in the enemy's defenses. How do you adapt to a changing environment? So I looked at that and saw that publishing had been very static for so many years, hadn't really adapted to the changing times as fast as
Mm.
some other businesses that had to adapt more quickly because it's publishing was like a huge aircraft carrier making slow turns like this, not like a PT boat or a cigarette boat or something like that is more agile and adaptive. So it's for me, it's been about has to be about the work, obviously, hence the missed deadlines. But I need to get better at it now that it's been made very clear to me that my me missing deadlines affects more than just me. Well,
Yeah.
80s, maybe you just didn't care back in the 80s. You just said, hey, it's gonna be done.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know how or why it changed. But it definitely had, and he wasn't having it.
Yeah, that's so great. It
to,
didn't
to
have to.
their chagrin.
Yeah.
But you know what? Like it works. It worked for him. But I'm not. The Tin Men is the first book of the three that I wrote on like an actual like a normal pace for a modern writer because I wrote it. I wrote it in a year, almost exactly. But I actually didn't take a year because I had so many other things going on. But the Bloodlines was a pandemic book. I don't know your experience at that time, but I like everybody just went away. Like I didn't hear from anybody. Like I just I don't. I'm like I know I have this book. I know it's due, but nobody's checking on me. They have no clue. Even my father, because he was writing a book, his own book. So I worked for 6 months on that book before he read it, and I just said, "Here's 6 months of work," and that was a little nerve wracking,
Uh,
but it worked out.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. All of them are fantastic and interesting when you talk about the changing environment. When you talk about that book launch party that you went to and seeing all the Gold Coasts up and down the stairs, and wow, I mean, that's not my experience these days. No book launch parties like I saw. If I happened to catch something in the 80s in, let's say, the New York Times or whatever, and I'd see a picture of an author holding a scotch or a martini at some party where everybody's dressed up, and you can tell it's almost like society page type stuff. And probably I did
Yeah,
see more of them in society pages than I actually saw like a book review type thing. But you see that, and you're like, oh wow, that's pretty cool. Yeah, zero. I mean, on the Hollywood side, the premieres and the after parties, that's still, I think, what I envisioned. But certainly there have been no book launch parties like they did back in the day
yeah.
for like your dad, and Clancy, and everybody else back then. It's just a different time.
They don't have as much fun anymore. I think
I
we we
know.
did we did one for the Deserter, but we paid for it, so well, that was nice. But then that was it. I mean, we didn't do any after that. But
Yeah,
yeah,
I guess when you've done them before, it kind of becomes your thing. If you did them in the 80s and 90s, and that's your thing, you kind of expect it. And maybe if it goes away a little bit from the publisher, maybe there's some negotiation. I don't know, but I'd probably be throwing them for myself if I had done them from throughout the 80s and 90s, and kind of it was and I enjoyed
right.
it. If I enjoyed that sort of a thing, and it marked a celebration of this thing
Yeah,
done and moving on to the next one, that would be kind of cool. But I haven't seen any of that these days. And the ones that I have seen, they're certainly not what I saw in the society pages in the 80s and 90s. Nothing even close. But you got to
right.
experience that. So that's pretty cool.
That's nice. Yeah, it's this other world that I do have memories of, which is nice. Into the 2000s, really. Like really, I remember some parties in Manhattan too for the Lions game, and then yeah, like really most of the Corey books until maybe the last two. Yeah,
I remember exactly where I was when I was reading almost all of those books, Nightfall in particular, because I made the mistake of reading it on a plane. And if, I don't know if you remember the first like few chapters are all about the different things that take planes down. One of them being an
yeah.
astronaut. And of course, I'm reading that on a plane and there's turbulence, and I'm like, oh my goodness, I should not have read this book on a plane. But
I
uh,
know.
what did you get? Like, did you have a totally separate writing style than your dad did? Did he influence you even before you knew you were gonna be a screenwriter, go off to Hollywood and do that sort of thing? Was there a work ethic? Was there a schedule? Was there anything that you either that you inherited that you didn't know you inherited, or that you specifically got from him as you went into screenwriting and then now into the pages of these novels?
Two things I think I inherited from him that I didn't quite realize at the time, working on screenplays. One was good, one was bad. One was I think having a really good ear for dialogue, and having fun with that, and being a listener of people, and being able to hear your characters in your head, and really kind of he's always so good with dialogue, and I'd like to think I picked some of that up, and that's obviously a major aspect of screenplays. The other thing though is he would never plot out his books. He had these strong characters, and he had these really strong concepts and setups. He wouldn't plot them out, nor would they generally be. They're not the most complex plots. They're often they're linear, not in the bad way. They hook you when you just go. And he allowed the story to kind of take him there. And he would always find his way by the end. But because of that, he was always like, I come up with things I never would in the abstract come up with that I do. And for me, writing a screenplay like that is kind of a disaster, because you really, it's just a different art form, and you really have to beat it out. You can do some of that, but you have to, it's a lot less forgiving, of a format, and so that frustrated me for a while. But screenplays, I think what I really wanted to do maybe was write novels, because that's now doing that, then I am able to kind of harness that a little more, and know that I'm kind of going on a journey. I don't know. Do you find that with you? How do you work on your stories?
I've done it the same way the whole time, and I didn't read a book on it. Of course, I read like Stephen King's on writing, David Morrell's successful novelist, like
Mhm.
those types of things, the War of Art, Stephen Pressfield, like. But that's about it. And none of those. I think David Morrell's goes into more of like the ABC structure, that sort of a thing. But I didn't take that away from reading that. It was really all just common sense and thinking about what was going to work for me, and that's remained the same from the first book to now. And that is, I come up with that title because I don't want to be wasting bandwidth on the title. I know a lot of authors don't come up with their titles. I've come up with all of mine thus far, and even if it changes, a couple of them have changed. They're all working titles, but about two of them
Mhm.
have changed as I've written. But I don't want to waste bandwidth worried about a title, so I
Right.
get a title down. I get a one sentence, a couple words, maybe two sentences theme that I put on a yellow sticky and put on my writing computer, which is a separate computer from this computer. So I only write on that other one. And there's an email
Mhm.
that only I have where I send myself ideas and stuff. So I'm not searching through other emails. So that's a separate computer in the
That's
other.
smart.
So do that, and then that theme guides the writing process for me. So it's every sentence chapter has to directly or indirectly, more importantly, tie back to that theme. So I have that to guide me right there in a yellow sticky, and then I write a one-page executive summary, and I read it and I say, is this worth the next year and a half of my life? And if the answer is yes, then I read it again and I say, if someone were to walk by Hudson News in the airport, pull the book off the shelf and read something similar to this on the back as a description, would they be willing to invest time they're never going to get back in these pages? And if the answer is yes or probably, then that's the story. And then I turn that into an outline, but not a crazy outline, one where if I run into an obstacle, then I just jump right over it and continue going, knowing that I'll figure it out in a year. It's not like the battlefield where I have a split second to make a decision that's going to impact everybody to my right and left, and maybe have multi-generational impacts. So I know that I'll figure it out. I can sleep on it. I can edit. I have time. So
Yeah.
I like to know where I'm going. So then and then that's the subjective part on the outline. When I get to a stage where I'm happy, then I turn that into the narrative, which of course
Right.
takes time. But that's been the process from the beginning, and it seems to work for me. Haven't even made very. I don't think I've made any refinements on it. That's just how I did it, and how I'll continue to do it until. But I'm willing to adapt and change if there's something that speeds it up or makes it more efficient or something along those lines. Just haven't found it yet. But
Well, it seems to work for you.
yeah,
And
seems
you're
to.
doing something right. But I think that's really smart to kind of imagine the book as an item, not in a non-artistic way, but to think, yeah, this is this. Somebody's pulling it off the shelf and looking at it. What is it going to say? Because it can, when you're forced to do those kinds of. For me, it's hard because I sometimes I don't write that kind of thing until the book is almost done and the publisher says, we want copy for this or for that, and I should do it earlier, because sometimes it's hard. You have to now sum up this thing that's just so big in your head. But if you start with it, it kind of does concentrate the ideas and the things that are actually driving it are important, kind of like pop out to you in a
Yeah.
way. Yeah.
I wonder if I get that from not even publishing and reading, but from Hollywood growing up when that the voiceovers in trailers and previews. I wonder if I
Right.
get that. I haven't thought about this till just now, but it's possible because now I watched that preview and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this is going to be amazing. I can't wait to see this. And whatever hints it gave have the elements of a story that get you excited about then seeing the movie eventually. So
Yeah.
that's where it comes from, is having almost that trailer or that preview in my mind that has a beginning, middle, and end, gets me excited about it. That it's possible that's where that comes from. I didn't
No,
think
absolutely.
of
I took this really good class on film structure at UCLA, and then the professor is just brilliant. He ran the producing program, and this brilliant guy. But he would say, what is the one question, whether it's a book or a movie, you see something and you say, hey, did you see this, or oh, you should see this. What's the one question everybody asks? What's it about? Right? Like it's not like, oh, what's it look like, or what is how are the costumes? I mean, it's not even how's the writing. It's this there is this kind of broader idea that in drama they would call like the spine, we call it theme, whatever, that you want everybody wants. Like you need to in your own head see what this thing is or is going to be, or if it's going to like hook you or not. It's very very like big picture level.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
amazing. I got to say that there, in no small part is what I'm doing today directly related to reading all your dad's books growing up. I mean, there's no doubt that being able to read those books and have those be my foundation during a time without cell phones, without 24/7 video games like Atari 2600, you can only play for a certain amount of time before you get bored, run outside, or have to read a book. At a time when, if you wanted to see a movie, it's like you're waiting for your parents to drop you off at a movie or at 7:15 or maybe 9:30 when you get a little older, but you're waiting for it. It's not instantly available anytime you want to see it on your TV, on a tablet, on a phone, and of course no social media and all these distractions that are keeping us all from reading. So to have read those books during the 80s, 90s, during a time before I had a mortgage, before I had kids, before I had a job, all of those things, when you essentially don't have a care in the world and you can really invest into the story in the pages and experience the magic in those pages without the most powerful corporations in the world trying to distract you and enrage you and keep you from reading, essentially. I can't imagine a better way to prepare for what I'm doing now than to have read all those books growing up. And your dads were obviously so impactful and influential on me. But I can be different today. Like if somebody wakes up at age 40 today and says, I'm going to give this writing thing a try. What should I have been reading for the last 30 years of my life? And then to go back and read those things, because I got to read these as contemporary thrillers. Now they're time machines back to this
Right.
one to the 80s. But to read them as contemporary thrillers during that time between age, let's say 10 and 20, when you are just so, I guess, malleable it's such an impactful time in your life generally. That was invaluable. There's no way that I would be writing at the level that I am today without having read your dad's books. There's just no way. There's no way.
That's amazing. That's a great, what a legacy for him, and what an amazing thing for you. I was thinking about what were my formative books, and I wasn't reading his books for a while because I was too young. Like when the Charm School came out, I was not quite. I read it maybe a few years after it came out, but I read a lot of Ray Bradbury when I was like, he was like probably my favorite writer when I was like a teenager. So I remember, which is weird because that's not the kind of stuff I'm writing now or even interested in, but there is something about that the way he kind of brings in these big ideas and kind of creates these worlds. I don't know. It's somewhere in there, somewhere in my head. They're deep in there.
Yeah, yeah, no,
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah.
And I think actually in this book in particular, now that you say that, I can see it in the Tin Men in particular. And before I get to that though, what movies growing up do you think influenced you? Because you went the screenwriting track first. So what were those ones that you saw growing up that maybe inspired you to go down that path?
So my dad was known for showing me completely age inappropriate movies.
Right.
Like, and we go to it's in the 80s and early 90s, go to the video rental place, and so you'd see all the covers, and um he showed me Alien, and I was way too young for it. The Graduate. I remember, like, I think the cover of The Graduate was like it's like Dustin Hoffman, like these two like legs, you know. I was like, oh, this is gonna be so awkward to watch this with my dad. I didn't quite understand like it was like a work of art. Like is this like a smut film? Like what is this gonna be? The Animal House. I thought that was a big influence on me, but we did watch so just got a lot of like 70s and 80s classics. And then I feel like when I was an adolescent in the early 90s and all these amazing genre films coming out, like Batman, Jurassic Park, Beetlejuice. And I remember every single one of those movies going to see it. And then when I got older, when I was in college, I think I got really influenced by the kind of movies I hadn't really been exposed to before, which would be like Italian cinema and like a lot of like Soviet films, which are just, there's a kind of just, there's a word. I don't know. There was especially Soviet. There was a real grim, but like beautiful, grim quality to them. Because even some of them that were they were propaganda pieces. But it's like this state-funded propaganda, but creating some of the most beautiful images you've ever seen. You know. So aesthetically, a lot of that stuff kind of really stuck with me. So it's a hodgepodge. It's Hollywood blockbusters. It's like horror and other kinds of movies I watched way too young. The Godfather, I remember, the Michael Corleone, the hit in the restaurant. I was really young when I saw this guy get like shot through the neck. So there was, I wouldn't say it traumatized me by any means, but it did. I think because you're watching some of this stuff and taking it in at a point where you're so sensitive to it, its impact is just really, it's much more intense than it will ever be to see a movie like that when you're older.
Yeah.
So,
That's wild. Yeah, those ones that we see when we're younger, or just even sentences that people say when we're younger, stick out to me. I still have memories of just things that people said, for whatever reason, stuck with me.
yeah.
And certainly lines in films. I used to be able to I could do probably all of First Blood, all of Rambo First Blood Part 2, all of Commando, all of Predator, all of Fletch. I could do Fletch probably beginning to end. Growing up, the original Fletch was Chevy Chase, based
Yeah,
on,
that was great.
for those listening. People don't know it's a book, a series of books. But I could used to do all those from memory, and it's that used to be, I think, Hollywood's. I mean, the United States was probably one of our most powerful exports was Hollywood and was film. Maybe not anymore, but it certainly was for a long time. And
Yeah.
I've heard Quentin Tarantino talk about film from the Soviet days, and I want to say it's called The Frogman or The Frogmen. And it's not about SEALs or naval special warfare or anything like that. But I heard him talk about it on his podcast, and it sounded pretty interesting. I keep meaning to try to track it down, and I haven't yet, but I'd like to do that. But it's interesting that you saw Soviet films.
Oh yeah. Have you seen I Am Cuba? You know about
Oh,
it?
no,
It's a pro Castro propaganda film, but it was made by the Russians and Soviet funded, and it's considered visually one of the most like influential, incredible, because they because these are authoritarian governments, they can command whatever resources they wanted, and there's one shot that P.T. Anderson did. I think it was almost like an exact quote in Boogie Nights, somebody like jumping in the pool and everything like that. But it's one of those films where the politics of it are so heavy-handed and almost cartoonish, but the visual artistry of it is so high level. So it's kind of it's a really interesting film. Check it out.
I definitely will check that out.
All right, we're going to talk a little bit today about the SIG P210, a unique pistol, a classic pistol, and one that I included in two of the novels, Only the Dead and Red Sky Morning. The two passages that I'm about to read feature conversations between Rafe Hastings and James Reese. And in creating these characters, I needed to differentiate them in a variety of ways because they're both about the same age, they were both in the SEAL teams at the same time, and would have similar experiences downrange. So one, I gave a background with a father who is a SEAL and a grandfather who's also in Naval Special Operations. And for Rafe Hastings, I gave him a family lineage in Rhodesia. But I also differentiated them by what they prefer to carry. While Reese is more of a modern Kydex holster, striker fire pistol type guy, we have Rafe Hastings, who's more of a 1911 guy, 45, leather holster, leather belt, and hence the difference between both of these characters. And when Reese gets his P210 in Only the Dead, He has just been released from prison. Rafe Hastings picks him up. Rafe Hastings, of course, is a 1911 guy. So he gives Reese something more akin to a 1911 than, say, a striker fire auto-loading pistol. And here's their conversation. Rafe opened the Tuffy console between the seats and handed Reese the holstered pistol. Reese pulled it from its leather, ejected the magazine, and tucked it under his leg before pushing down a manual safety on the left side and racking the slide rearward. A round ejected, which Reese caught. He then locked the slide to the rear and confirmed the chamber was clear. Yours? Reese asked. It is. It's a SIG P210, customized by Bruce Gray. Where's the red dot on this thing? Reese joked, twisting it in his hand as if searching for a modern reflex optic. His friend ignored the comment. I know you can't handle the recoil of the 45 in my 1911s, hence this 9mm, Rafe smiled. And I know how much you enjoy rich kid shit that someone else pays for. You do have me there. Bruce only built a few, so try not lose it, or break it, or get it confiscated by the federal government. Don't you worry, Reese said. Mind if I dry fire it? Be my guest. Reese checked the chamber once more and rode the slide home out of respect for the gunsmith who had painstakingly customized the classic SIG pistol. He then rested his right thumb on the manual safety as he slowly pressed the trigger to the rear. That's nice. I might have to get one of these with your dad's credit card. I don't think it's expired yet. Rafe smiled and shook his head. Reese reinserted the magazine and racked the slide back once again, letting it slam forward to chamber a round. He then pushed up the manual safety, ejected the magazine, and pressed the round he had just caught moments earlier back into the top of the stack before reinserting the magazine and pulling down on it to ensure it was properly seated. That's only the dead, of course. James Reese gets into a couple gunfights with this later in the book when he is not disposing of bad guys with the tomahawk. And then the P210 makes another appearance here at Red Sky Morning, book number 7. You still carrying that P210, Rafe asked? As long as I keep out shooting you on the range with the P210, I'm gonna stick with it as my daily carry. I thought I recommended you switch back to your 365X macro. I should, but I've grown to like the feel of the 210. There is some history there, Rafe confirmed, but it's only got 8 rounds. 10. It's the Bruiser Industries Bruce Gray edition, plus 2 base pads on the magazine. They made another one for me. Did you tell them you'll probably lose it or break it within the month? Good point. I should have gotten 2. 2 is 1, as they say. I've heard that somewhere before, Reese said. P210, classic pistol. SIG's made a few over the years. This was a compact carry they made a few years ago. This was a commemorative edition they made a few years ago. And this is the P210 Target. It is currently available. That's nice.
And this one, you went, did I see that you went to some military bases, observed some training, that sort of thing for this? And before we get into it, I want to read a couple sentences actually, because I wrote down here a couple, let's see, pages in the beginning. Yeah, here, 53. And I just love this sentence here. You write, it occurred to him that this might have been one of the most terrifying ways to die. Murdered by a thing with a face but no eyes, with hands but no skin, and a body with no soul. I thought that was an amazing sentence. I love that. And then 84 here. You're at Morgan nodded. It was a war whose level of ambition was not matched by the quality of planning. The only people truly prepared were the war profiteers with fat contracts at the Pentagon. And then next page, Taylor said Caroline Dixon compared them to self-driving cars. The general rolled his eyes. That's a terrible analogy. They're circus tigers designed to kill but trained to be compliant, trained but not tamed. They do exactly what you want until one day, for whatever reason, one of them rips your throat out. Those are some great sentences in here.
Thank you.
And,
Thank you.
It's fantastic. I loved reading this. What was the inspiration to go this route, to have, I mean, AI is obviously now a part of all of our lives. And then when it comes to warfare, it's evolving at such a fast pace. But it seems so timely. What was the spark for the idea? And then what was it like to write about something that is not sci-fi, but if you blinked and you still think it's 2012 or 2015 or even 2020, it might seem like it is. What was the background and how this came to be?
Yeah, so people would see this book and they would probably assume I'm the one who pushed for this subject matter, but believe it or not, it was my father. The thing I started with was I want to write a book. I want to write a murder mystery. I had a setting. I want to do it out in the desert. I want it to be this isolated, high pressure place. I want it to be about the United States. I want it to be about like the pressure that special forces specifically are under. I've been reading a lot about abuse of drugs, performance enhancing drugs, and also, drug dealing, which seemed to be relevant for CID characters. But then it was okay. They're at this base, and there's something secretive going on. But what is it? My first thinking was kind of Jason Bourne kind of stuff, where you're kind of trying to turn men into machines. And then we maybe probably both together started talking about about autonomous weaponry and stuff, and he was like, yeah. And I was like, well, hold on, like I'm not sure the publisher's going to go for this. This is a Nelson DeMille book. This is going to be too techy. It's going to seem too sci-fi. He said, no, do it. I'm like, okay, well, maybe it's about robotics, but let's not get too into the AI thing. He's like, do it. He's like, this is what people were talking about. He wrote, his first big book was a hijack of a Concorde, right when the Concorde had come out. He wrote about, I think it was the Panther set in Yemen right around the time of the Arab Spring. He was always kind of hitting these things right as they were. And he even despite being 80 years old, he still had a knack for knowing what the conversation was going to be about, and also how to keep it grounded, how to keep it as not a Tom Clancy style techno thriller, and certainly not a sci-fi story, but a grounded, realistic feeling thriller. And that was a challenge. So we decided on this together, that let's write something about AI and about robotics. But I came back to the idea of, I still wanted to involve drug use, drug abuse, and these things all seem to kind of actually fit together. And again, it was if it was men fighting machines, and not, despite being the best of the best, still not being able to kind of achieve victory over them. What do the men do? The men try to become more like the enemy that they're fighting, and by using these drugs. And of course, because they're people, these have bad consequences. So that was kind of bringing all the different ingredients together into this story. And then for research, I read this really good book called Army of None about about autonomous weaponry. And it was maybe it was written in 2019. It's pretty current. But more importantly, it was not so much that it's current, but that the kind of the philosophy of how this guy was saying the military thinks of autonomy. It's kind of this balance between autonomy, lethality, and now intelligence. There's these three different things, and if it's too autonomous, it can't be too lethal. And if it's too intelligent, then it different ways. And reading about like loitering munitions and how those are kind of a form of autonomous weapon, different tragic accidents that have happened from friendly fire that had to do with relying on autonomous systems that then gave inaccurate information. And so all those kind of having this kind of foundation of my understanding as much as I could of these real world ways that I'm sure you have a lot of things to say about this too, that soldiers are relying on certain levels of autonomy, but always with a human in the loop, so that's like the final step that nobody, as far as I know, everybody's wise enough to not do this yet. If you actually take a person out of the loop with something that has the power to kill. And if you do that, why do you do it? And then what are the controls you put in place? So as I was thinking about this and writing the book, I was like, if I was designing this program and I had these weapons, and I wanted to make it as secure as possible, what would I do? Right? So starting there, and then how does it go wrong anyway? Because if you don't build it up, you have to have the people who make the mistake seem really smart, or else it's just going to be like there's only conflict, and there's only danger in the story because everybody involved is an idiot, and they didn't think it through. So I wanted to make these smart people who really did think it through. I think the CEO, Brodie and Taylor CEO, towards the beginning of the book says to them about these autonomous weapons, listen, the people who design this have seen all the same sci-fi movies you have. It's obvious what the dangers of this are. They've thought this through. If whatever did go wrong, it's not going to be obvious. And I kind of took that as a brief for myself too, as I was kind of designing it. And the AI stuff, that was harder to research than the robotics, because I don't really have a head for that stuff. I don't understand, language learning models that well, and neural networks and all that stuff. But with any of this, it was know it enough, know it more than the reader, know it more than the average reader. You don't have to know it much more, just a little bit more that you can deploy what you've learned in an interesting way for the drama, because it's all it ever is about, you know. Um, yeah, so that's kind of how we came to it, and it's funny though because he really was the one pushing for the tech side of it.
That's amazing. Yeah, one of my last ones, Red Sky Morning, I talk about I have AI. I have AI in a couple of the books, quantum computers, but one of them I explore like what happens when your enemy takes that human element out of the decision making process because it's so much faster without that human element there. So if they do that, what in turn do you have to do in order to stay within that decision making loop and do things faster than your enemy? Because warfare is a game of adaptation, obviously, and whoever adapts faster than the other typically comes out on top. Not always, but most of the time. And so, let's say your near peer enemy does that, then what do you do, and what does that mean for all of us? So that was one of my last ones. So I really enjoyed your take on this here, and I loved how you explained to that point where you talk about the soldiers trying to become more like the machines with the drugs and all that. I thought that was incredible. Absolutely loved that in here, and it's also a whodunit-ish type of a thing, like a mystery in here as well. So like you said, it's not a Tom Clancy techno thriller. There's enough techno things in there to make it all believable. And I'm sure it is all, we're probably, as soon as this came out, we're probably advanced a little bit beyond
Yeah,
that. Crazy to think how fast things are changing and evolving. But this I loved that part of it, how it was a mystery in there as well. Because I was like, well, who's the good guys? Who's the bad guys? Other than our two main characters, of course, two protagonists in here, but everybody else, from the CO of the base to his second in command, and then all the other characters in there, the civilians in there as well. I'm trying to figure out like who's the good guy, who's the bad guy in here, and I
right.
loved how you did that. That was
Thank you.
did you start with that? Did you start with saying, "Hey, I want to have elements of a mystery woven into this thriller"?
Yeah, I definitely wanted that. I wanted to have this be at the heart of it was a murder mystery, and but it was a murder mystery where you actually don't know if it's a murder, right? I mean, was this what
Right.
because they talk about, was this a workplace accident? Was this a Frankenstein story of a thing becoming self-aware, or was this a straight up classic murder where somebody, if you think of these machines as they're just weapons, somebody turned the weapon on the victim, you know? So you don't quite know for a while which of those three it is, or if it's a combination of those three. And I didn't know as I was writing it who the killer was, which is fun, you know, because you're not dropping hints because you don't know yourself. And then of course you can go back, but as the personalities develop, they get to develop organically without trying to make anybody too suspicious, because you also don't want too many obvious like red herrings of like, this is so obvious this guy's the killer so he must not be, you know. So it was actually helpful to not know for a while, and
Right.
actually changed as I was writing it who it was going to be.
Oh wow, interesting. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's you definitely pulled it off in here because
thank you.
I was guessing that the whole time, and I thought that was incredibly fun as a reader. And I love it. I think in the beginning, somebody says something on the lines of maybe they don't need CID here, maybe they need not HR, but whatever.
OSHA.
Yeah, yeah.
Right, right,
Calling
right,
the wrong people. I love that one. And
right.
also, what was the thinking behind keeping it all? And that was brilliant how you did it, keeping it all in one essentially location for the most part, where the majority of the action and everything, the story takes place. And in Hollywood, when I first got out there, I learned what a bottle episode was. I didn't know what one was until I got out there. And for those listening, it's like you have a television series, and there'll be one episode in that season that's like takes place in one place, and they do it for a couple of reasons to let you prep other sets and everything else you're going to move on to later, and then keep things contained, sometimes for cost as well, but sometimes it can be trapped in an elevator, or there's a Magnum episode where they're in a bank vault. Actually, there's one where they're in an elevator as well, I think. But regardless, you're kind of in one room essentially,
Right.
almost like that, like a bottle episode on this base that's isolated from the rest of the world, very deliberately because of what they're studying. And so, was that from the very beginning that you wanted to keep it contained to one location?
I did. It's like, because I felt like there was the first two books, you know, the Deserter it takes place in Caracas, it takes place in the jungle, and in Berlin, it's mostly all in the city. But it's, you know, they're going here, they're going here, they're going there. There's chases, and for me, it was partly a challenge because I love a well done bottle episode. One of my favorite, well, kind of well known, more modern ones would be episode of Breaking Bad,
And yeah,
whereas, you know, where they're trapped in the underground meth lab and there's a fly. You know, that's a great, it's a great one because you get to kind of just sharpen the focus on what's really going on. So for me, I'm like, I can't do that unless I have a good cast of characters and who have um, simmering tension and animosities. You know, like I'm like, there has to be factions here. There has to be, this place is not functioning properly. So what does that look like? You know, and how is the command kind of breaking down? And then that's this drama and this tension kind of on top of the other thing, because it gets in the way, and you might have, yeah, just having all these competing agendas and personality types, putting them all together. It was a little challenging to kind of actually figure out the sequence of events or what's the next chapter that happens, and you don't just want it to be, you know, they went to the crime scene and they went here and talked and they did this. But I think what I tried to do was allow that to make the tension just build and build and build until it kind of explodes.
yeah, no, it's an incredible job. And what did you learn about AI while you're doing this, as far as not specifically, but like where we're headed? Are you more worried about where we're headed, and it can be on the military side, or did you also start thinking about, hey, how does this impact Hollywood and screenwriting and even production, and then the publishing industry? What are your thoughts generally on AI after spending so much time thinking about it as you wrote this book?
Well, at first, actually, was a little heartened because there's a lot of very smart people who seem to think that achieving AGI, or was it artificial general intelligence, which I think is, I can't even remember in my research anymore. It's either intelligence equal to or beyond human intelligence is either going to happen it's going to take a long time or it's impossible. I'm reading this quantum physicist now who talks about the way that he believes consciousness is formed in the human brain and how that actually creates our intelligence and decision making, and how, for whatever reason, and I'm not that far into the book yet, it makes it that artificial intelligence as it is designed right now can never ever replicate that, even using a quantum computer. But on the other hand, in my real world experience, in my life, and all of us, you know, you're typing an email and then the AI tries to finish it for you, or I see people posting AI, you know, art on social media, and there was a period, maybe year or 2 years ago, where AI couldn't figure out how to make a human hand without like 8 fingers, and I was happy about that. But then like a week later, it had figured it out, and now we're onto video, and you know, my wife is a cinematographer, and she's very worried about this too. And my feeling is there are good applications for this. I don't want to be overly reactionary, but they should be help screen for cancer, you know, help with whatever other, you know, technical things that machine speed can really help with. And I'm sure there's valid military applications, but don't why would you give it the power to kill? And also, why would you give it the power to make art? Let it do the grunt work so that we can make the art, and leave the ultimate decisions about life and death out of its hands too. I just feel like it's the things that seem the most prominent are the areas in which I'm like, just why who's asking for this, you know?
Yeah, it's so tough. I think that at some point, I mean, obviously it's out of the bag and it's going and it's evolving and people are using it, and it's I feel like there needs to be. Remember in the '80s when the parental advisory came out for albums and music? It
Yeah,
seems like there needs to be something like that for books, for paintings, for sculptures. Once it gets hooked up to 3D printers or whatever's going to happen. But you should know as the consumer that this picture that you loved as you walked down the street and looked in a window and saw and just had thought it would be perfect in your house, that you go in and buy and then put it in your house and enjoy for 10 years, only to then find out that it wasn't made by an actual person, that whatever person's name is attached to it isn't even real, and it's just AI.
right.
So
Yeah,
I think there are questions there about does that negate your last 10 years of enjoying it? Maybe. I mean, it depends on the person, but you didn't have the choice. So I think you've got to have the choice. And I don't even know how to use ChatGPT. Don't have the app. I'm sure it's some sort of AI. It's just in a Google search. Obviously. But anything other than that, now people can say, hey, write my next book in Alex DeMille's tone or something like that.
Right.
It's possible.
But people have been, David Baldacci's been talking about this a lot. Like it's theft of intellectual property. It's because you can't make these things work. These things are predictive models, and they can't work unless they have all this material to use to make those predictions. Which is why also they can't really do anything original. It's inherently derivative. And again, I'm sure that this conversation can be seen in 5 years, and people will laugh at me for saying this stuff. But as it exists now, I don't think it's capable of that stuff. I think AI would have to become something different.
Yeah.
Not just it has to keep going and getting smarter, because it's not getting smarter. It's getting faster. It's getting more capable of sucking things up and then regurgitating them in maybe more clever ways. But I don't know. I'm pretty cynical about it, especially in the area of art.
Yeah, it's tough, but I know I got to let you go, and it's been so amazing talking to you. This is out now. When this podcast drops, this will have been out already. So everybody needs to pick up the Tin Men and follow you on all the socials and find out what you're doing next. And speaking of, what is next? What happens after tour? What are your plans going forward?
I have a proposal out in the wild for a new standalone thriller that actually gets into some of the stuff I mentioned here about consciousness and things like that. So it's I think it'll be interesting. So we're doing the pitching and everything right now. So I gotta get on the book a year schedule like you and everybody else.
Man, it's exhausting.
If I'm fortunate enough to do that, I will.
Well, I'm sure you will be.
We'll see.
This is amazing.
Jack, it was really, really good talking to you. Thank you so much.
You too. Such a pleasure. Best of luck on book tour, and best to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jack. You too. Take care.
This episode is brought to you by
Cry Havoc. From New York Times #1 bestselling author Jack Carr. Cry Havoc, a Tom Rees thriller. Order now.
Watch a Cry Havoc teaser here, or watch another episode of the podcast here.